Hey, welcome to the Courage Coaching and Counseling Podcast. And today's guest is Sierra Pedro. And thank you so much, Sierra, for coming on.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, thank you for being brave to be interviewed.
Yes, it certainly feels a little bit out of my comfort zone, but again, really excited and really excited for the podcast and to see what comes of it.
Thanks. So, uh, as we start, can you share a little bit about your background?
Sure. I studied journalism actually at U of O. My focus was in magazine design, storytelling. I did a lot of editing. And part of what I was drawn to journalism for was this draw to story and being able to get really deep with people, being in their moments of pain in their story, but also seeing these really beautiful turning points in how people have gone through hard things but that they have come out of it and they've learned so much. That seems to be a really big thing in the journalism world, is finding those turning points. And so I think for me, that was a segue into the counseling world, just being really drawn to interviewing people, talking to people, being really curious.
Mm.
And then I took a year off after my undergrad. I do wedding photography also. And so on that year off, I just focused on wedding photography, which was really fun. I got to go to Europe and capture a lot of really beautiful things.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
I
really
love
lovely.
I love hearing couples stories. And so,
Yeah.
you capture like special moments and times in their relationship.
What's so fun about doing wedding photography and also counseling is oftentimes, not always, like that we get some highlights in counseling and there's some celebrating with our clients, but oftentimes people come to counseling because they're going through really hard things, hard moments.
Mm.
And so I always joke with my friends, I do wedding photography and I get all of these highlights and these really happy moments. And then in counseling, I get a lot of these really deep and serious and sometimes sorrowful moments. And I love having that contrast in work.
Mm.
So that's been really fun.
Yeah. The um, with your interest in story and in journalism, the ups and downs of life, uh, you're you're getting comfortable capturing that um,
Hmm.
or writing about that. Can you tell me a little bit about uh, uh, a little more what you like about journalism and and and
Hmm.
and write? Or I guess I was assuming that it involved like writing, but are you talking about photojournalism or video? Uh,
Yeah, I'm
Marketing?
glad that you asked that because whenever I tell people that I studied journalism, the assumption is that I was studying reporting. And I did do a lot of reporting classes, but my focus was more so in the design world, so magazine design, and then also the photojournalism. And so for me, that visual storytelling was my main focus, communicating through design or communicating through an image.
Mm. Yeah. You mentioned turning points, I think,
Yeah,
earlier,
yes.
and well, one of the things I'm asking folks on the podcast is what are some of their like defining moments, and so I think that it's very similar to turning points. What have been some of the turning points in your life so far?
Oof, there's been a lot of little turning points along the way.
Mhm.
One really big moment for me in life was that I had a friend who passed away from cancer when I was a senior in high school.
Mm.
And so that was a really big moment in my life, a really traumatic moment. And looking back, it was just clear that my friends and I were in deep grief. And it's really beautiful to look back and to see how we helped each other cope with that. And so I think that moment for me was a big turning point in learning how to grieve as a community, but also learning how to lose really important people at a really young age. And that was also a big turning point to me in my faith. I think I had a lot of questions after that, right? A 17-year-old whose friend passes away, who has just been suffering. I had a lot of questions at a really young age about what is the purpose of life? What is the character of God? How could this happen?
Mm,
And so that kind of sent me on this journey of really wanting to uncover a lot of those answers and to figure those things out.
mhm. Yeah. What were some of the things that were helpful with that journey?
Mm, I remember, I think it's in John 8 when Jesus weeps over the death of Lazarus. I remember finally, I think I was at Young Life Camp and someone told me, go read this passage. And that just felt like a breath of fresh air to be able to see we have a God who has emotions. We have a God who weeps over the loss of his friend, who intimately knows the pain that I'm going through.
Mm,
Um, so in so in some ways, understanding that God was fully man and felt fully human and felt those emotions was really important to me. Um, and I think also finding my own community in adult life and leaving that community that I had just gone through a really hard thing with, going to college and finding new people and making those new deep friendships was really important for me in that process of healing too, because it was a scary thing making new friends after having just lost a friend.
oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then being away from home, did you go uh, away to college?
Yeah, my hometown is about 2 hours away from Eugene. So I did go a little bit, only a few hours. And I really like that distance. I love being able to go home whenever I want and make a day trip out of it, but also having the freedom of my own space.
Mm. It's far enough to feel like you're away from home.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. The so studied journalism, and sounds like you were busy working on different projects and involved in different things. Uh, ho- uh, Working with people was part of
Mhm.
the thing that prompted you to want to study uh, counseling. Is there anything else that kind of helped you make that decision?
Yeah, so I was going through a cohort class through my church, and we were studying theology. Um, and I remember sitting in there and thinking, wow, I really miss school. I want to go back to school, but I have no idea what I want to study. Because in journalism, you can get a master's, but you're studying the same things that you studied in undergrad. So I knew if I went back to school, I wouldn't want to get another degree in journalism. So I was deciding between teaching or counseling. And I had just asked a lot of people in my life, like, what do you see in me? Do you think that I would be good at either of these things? And the overwhelming response was counseling. I think I had a few qualities of just being a quick listener, someone who observes, someone who has a lot of questions. That really pushed me to counseling. So having people point those things out in me was really helpful.
Nice to just confirm like it
Yes.
might be a good fit for you. So one of the things that I'm curious about and that I ask folks, and we talked a little bit before we hit record today, is I'm always curious about people's personalities, and
Yes.
uh,
So fun.
it's just fascinating how uh, just for my own self-awareness, uh, but also understanding people better,
Hmm.
and learning more about the different personality types. So, would you mind sharing like what maybe your Myers-Briggs or your Enneagram number or Strengths Finder, whatever? Uh,
Sure. I love this conversation. So on the Enneagram, I'm a 4 wing 5. So very creative, artsy, but also more of the observer, the quiet, wise one. I forget the term for the 5, the investigator, I believe.
I think so. Yeah.
But you know what's so funny is so many of my numbers are like off the charts. So I have 5 numbers above 90% when I took the test,
Oh, okay.
which
Yeah.
was fascinating.
So it you express and play it plays out in different ways.
Yes. So like my 4, 5, 1, 2 are all super high. And I see a little bit of those pieces in myself. And maybe it's just because with the 4, it's a lot about identity. Who am I? And so I think I spent a lot of my life looking at other people and really wanting to take on their characteristics. So that's my theory on why a lot of the numbers are high, is because 4 is my primary number.
Mm.
Yeah.
The one thing that fours like value um,
Hmm.
is being unique
Yes.
and different. Like, where does that show up in your life?
I think I have a lot of quirky interests. So I like really vintage things. Like I love a good historical drama. I really like Pride and Prejudice would be something that I would choose to watch. I love musicals. So I think there's a lot of things in my life that feel really quirky and old fashioned. And that was my way. First of all, I just really like those things, but also I think growing up, it was like, oh, I'm not modern, I'm vintage, I'm old fashioned. And so I think that was
Yes.
my way of being a little bit different. And sometimes I just get like really possessive over my interests, which is something that I've had to grow in life. Like there are times when, for instance, when Hamilton came out and a lot of my friends really enjoyed it and were singing the songs,
Oh,
there's a piece of me that's like, no, that's my thing. I want to
yes.
have that all to myself.
Yes. I was like you're tapped into it like early, and then
Yeah.
and then people jumped on the bandwagon.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you do musical theater when you were younger?
I did a little bit of theater, but I had so much social anxiety as a kid. And
Mm.
that created a lot of tension in me. I really wanted to perform. I really wanted to be on the stage, but I was so terrified. So we did The Wizard of Oz in high school.
Mhm.
But since my high school is so small, that was the only musical that we've done in like the past 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you grew up in a small town?
Yes, I think there's about 16,000 people in my hometown.
How many uh, classmates did you have like in your senior class?
Yeah, I graduated with about 130 people.
Mm-hmm. Nice. The uh, so when you were younger, social anxiety was a challenge. Uh, what are some of the things that have helped with that?
Mm. I wish I could pinpoint really specific things, but I think just age and getting older and also just practicing being with people and communicating with people.
Mm-hmm.
The more that I interact with others, the more that it helps alleviate those fears. Um, yeah, just practice, I guess.
Yeah, that's so neat that you that was hard for you when you were younger, but then you just like went to Europe like after you graduated. Like that's pretty cool. It's really brave
Thank you.
to grow and mature and be confident enough to do that. So uh so you started the grad program, the counseling program at Western Seminary. Uh Tell me a little bit about that experience and maybe some of your favorite classes or things that you've learned.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Western Seminary has been so amazing. First of all, I'm just really, really thankful that I chose to go to school there. I know that there's a lot of other really good programs that you can go to for counseling, but I just feel really supported by the people there. And I love that I get to take theology and Bible classes alongside of the counseling studies. It's, yeah, really fun for me. Right now, I'm in a group counseling class and I love it. We get to
Mm.
practice being in group therapy with one another. And then throughout the week, we're studying the content and we take turns leading the group. And so I just really love when I
Oh,
get to experience what we're learning.
mm.
And we get to do that in the group therapy class. it's a little bit challenging on Zoom, but we're making it work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There were a few classes that I took going through the program. Uh and group counseling was like one of the ones that was like life changing for sure. Like you said, experiencing what you're learning.
Yeah,
Um
yeah.
and and you know, growing up in church, like you go to Bible study and youth group, and you do group experiences, but group counseling, group therapy is a different animal than a lot of people have experienced. It was the first time I had experienced it going through that
Hmm.
class.
Yeah. Have you led any group therapy since being in school?
Uh, yeah, I did. It was more psychoeducational for insomnia, so I
Hmm.
did group for sleep problems, and but I haven't done a group therapy group yet, and that's one of the goals for this year, and I really wish I had uh, done one last year for sure. I want to do emotionally healthy adulting for millennials group,
Oh, amazing.
and so
Amazing.
it just a group for like figuring out who am I, what am I supposed to do, um, uh, how do I find my person? How do I find and fall in love? How do I date and with healthy boundaries and mature? So
Yeah.
those are kind
Wow.
of my people.
That's so needed. I'm like, hey, how do I sign up?
So we're um, I'm trying to figure out the logistics of like group online and things like that. So
Hmm.
yeah, the in your so are you doing clinical internships, Sierra?
Yeah, I'm interning at the Center for Community Counseling here in Eugene. So I go to school in Portland, but I live in Eugene and I'm interning here. Um, and what I really love about this internship site is that a lot of our clients are uninsured or low income. And so we're able to provide a service for them at a really affordable cost.
Mm,
So that feels really rewarding and just really purposeful work. And because we don't bill insurance, we don't diagnose people. So I really enjoy that because what it means is that we're not pathologizing people right away and we're able to work with them without having to necessarily give them a label, which sometimes can be really helpful. But I think feeling forced to give someone a diagnosis on day one feels a bit
mm,
daunting to me.
right. Yeah. Yeah, that can be tricky. So you don't have to deal with uh, that challenge. What are some of the counseling orientations or modalities uh, that you're uh, like specializing in
Mhm.
or focusing on learning?
I love narrative therapy. It makes so much sense to my
Mhm.
brain and the way that I
Yes.
interpret the world. Yeah. So I love being able to utilize a lot of narrative therapy skills, whether that's um, even if it's just internally for me. A lot of times I'm not uh, reworking a story with a client necessarily. I think I use more CBT, DBT skills in sessions often. But personally in my brain, as I'm hearing a client talk, I'm thinking, what is the story that they've constructed of themselves? Or what is the story that they've been told about themselves?
Mm,
Because oftentimes a lot of things can be pinpointed back to childhood, whether a parent has given us a message about who we are, or someone else that is an important attachment figure in our life. So I love narrative therapy for that reason, to be able to figure out what is this story and is there a way that we can reframe and restructure this story that is healthier and more helpful to our lives.
mm. Yeah, that's a good explanation of narrative therapy for listeners who might not be familiar with that. The uh, so w- your clients, you like to use narrative therapy. Um, do you have a specific demographic or group of people that um, you're working with in particular?
Not yet. A lot of the demographic that I'm working with is about 20 through 50 years of age. So I haven't worked with teens yet, but I really would love to work with teens in the future. Like the stage of development of identity versus role confusion, I really love that stage of people, that 13 through 18 years of age. And I get to mentor a lot of kids that age through different programs and through my church. So that is really fun for me. But I really would love to work with them in a clinical setting as well. So far, so far I've really been drawn to working with people who are really artistic, or
Mm.
already have the skills in their life where they enjoy journaling, they enjoy creating things. Oftentimes we're using a lot of metaphors in sessions, using a lot of visuals, and I love that. That's really fun for me.
Yeah, the growing up, I didn't consider myself artistic or creative for many years, um, but it was probably I thought it was like 6 or 7 years ago, but I saw like a Facebook memory that reminded me it was like 11 years ago that I
Uh-huh.
started looking at uh, counseling, at therapy as more of a creative endeavor versus a science, and like the medical model of diagnose and then treat.
Yeah.
To identify the problem, so then you identify the solution and have a treatment plan, but just
Uh-huh.
more of listening to people's stories and healing, uh, and living as an expression, an artful expression uh, of your life, and that has made it so fun because it takes me out of the role of like being the expert to try to figure out like what's the problem,
Yes.
and then what's the treatment, what's the homework and treatment plan, to like this could be anything. Like it's gonna be like an adventure to figure out like what like you as a client come up with, um, as you rewrite the narrative or write
Mm,
um, who you want to become. What do you want to make, what do you want to make important in your life, um, what do you want your life to be, and with couples, like, well, what do you want your relationship to to be, like the happy ending.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you do ministry with teens and have relationships with that. um uh, w- what are some of the ways that you integrate, um, like your counseling expertise with ministry? Like, maybe a better question is, how are those similar, and but then how are those different? Um,
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think all of the qualities that we want to have as counselors, like the basic, I want to be attentive, I want to listen, I want to be open, I want to be authentic and genuine rather than putting on a show. I think those all carry over into interactions with other people, whether we're discipling, whether we're getting coffee with a friend.
mm,
Having that presence, I think, is really helpful. And so I carry that into my work in that realm. But I really have to fight the tendency to ask specific questions or to do like an intervention technique with mentees because that's not my role there. My role isn't to
mm,
be their therapist. My role is to be more of a confident or, yeah. In some ways, the roles kind of overlap, but I certainly don't want to be doing like really detailed interventions with them.
mhm, mhm. It can get tricky for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if it comes naturally to you.
Mm.
Has is becoming a therapist uh, uh, a natural fit for you?
I think in some ways, yes. I think before going into the program, I really considered myself an empathetic person. And then as soon as I got into the program, I realized, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do empathy at all. I have to relearn
Oh,
all of this,
it's
which
so
is,
hard when students experience that. I used to help out in the first class, the 501, the
yes.
counseling skills class, and would walk around with a clipboard and listen in on people practicing on each other, the triad groups. I
Uh-huh.
don't know if they still do that. Um, uh, but it it is the skills of active listening and reflective listening and and empathy. It's surprising because many counseling students, myself included, we go to the grad program because people affirm like, oh, you give great advice, like you're a good listener, like you
Uh-huh.
should totally do that. And then we were like, oh man, we need to retrain stuff or learn so much.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think a lot of people go into counseling programs and they're being taught to listen more actively. And it's funny for me, I'm not having to be taught as much of the listening part. That comes really naturally to me. I have to work on actively listening, for
Mm.
sure. But I think more so I'm being trained to learn how to talk more, which is not the usual experience. Normally, studying therapy, people are being taught, like, hey, sit back,
Mm.
listen, be
Don't
quiet,
work so hard. Don't work harder
don't
than your
work so
client.
hard. Yes. And
Mm.
for me, I'm having to learn, like, hey, actually, you can speak a little bit more. You can insert yourself here. It would be more helpful if you did talk a little bit more.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
You so early on, you might be uh, the the counselor who would let someone talk for 15 minutes and not be
Yes.
uncomfortable.
Uh-huh. I'm like, "This is great. I'll listen. Sure. Tell me all the things." But I certainly don't want people to get into the mode of just storytelling. A little bit of that is important,
Mm.
but also we're here to do work and to focus on specific things and to dissect parts of our story at the same time.
Ooh, yeah. So for listeners who haven't been to counseling before,
Mhm.
can you say a little bit more about that? Because we go to well, what's counseling like? Do I just like pour out my heart, pour out my story? Well, can you say a little bit more about?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think sometimes in the beginning stages of therapy, especially for those, I mean, when I first started going to therapy, there was so much that I wanted to say. And so I think oftentimes the first few sessions are that I have so much, I'm going to pour it all out. And then once we get that, the story, the main ideas, the themes, we're able to really pick and choose like, what are our goals here? What are some specific things that we're going to work on? Because we all have problems in our lives that we need to be working on, or we could be working on if we chose to. Um, so I think oftentimes people either have the idea of I'm going to go to therapy and I'm just going to talk about myself and not get any feedback and it'll be a place for me to unload, which is great. I think it can be helpful in that way. Or the idea is I'm going to go to therapy, a therapist is going to tell me exactly what to do and they're going to fix me. And both of those ideas are a bit off. It's more in the middle where we're going to listen and you're going to share your stories, and that's going to be just talking about our stories is a really healing experience most of the time, and having someone listen to us. And also a good therapist is going to backtrack, pick out parts of the story and pick out the themes and work to understand what are some of the themes in our life that just have been unhealthy or are ones that we want to do differently.
Mm, yeah, yeah. And those themes are sometimes so powerful and so limiting or painful.
Mhm.
And it's it's beautiful when people can free up from the things that hold them back, with whether it's the way they see the world or they see other relationships, maybe like as unsafe,
Yeah.
or just especially it's hard, like I really per, just yeah, uh, feel badly for my clients who just have have such a broken and wounded view of themselves
Mm.
because of what they've gone through. And when they start to heal up and see themselves differently, and it just opens up the world. It opens up life to just new possibilities, like a new um yeah, new way of living.
Well, it feels so empowering.
Mhm.
And with that release of those things and being able to do things differently and to learn like I have value, I am worthy, I'm good, that can change the directory of someone's entire life, the way that they interact with others, their future families, their future relationships. It's really cool how therapy can, as therapists, we do have a lot of power and in how the rest of people's lives will go just by being a really compassionate presence.
Mm. Yeah, it's it's a blessing to be able to do that work and get people to trust us to do that. Um yeah, it's really humbling uh that um, that it can make such a difference.
Mm,
Yeah. um with I folks will be listening to this, I'm hoping, of like beyond pandemic, but I'm curious uh how the this last year has been for you as a student, for one, and then also just um maybe what are some of the things that you're helping your clients with, just in
mm.
regards to life during pandemic.
Yeah, well, the language of beyond the pandemic is music to my ears. I'm so excited for that day. Um, Actually, in most ways, my past year has been really good. It's been a big blessing to be home a lot more. And I don't want to disregard, it also has been challenging in a lot of ways for me. Um, but when I look back over the past year, there were a lot of really good changes. I've had more time with my roommate to where we've been able to bond a lot more. Our relationship has never been better. I actually will like go on walks in my neighborhood really frequently. That's a habit that I have now. Before the pandemic, I never walked around my neighborhood. I talk to my neighbors now, right? There's like so many little things that um, I wasn't doing before that I'm really thankful I have it built into my life now. So that has been really good. Um, it also has been a whirlwind, especially in Oregon. Like we had the pandemic, we had the fires,
Mm,
so much going on. And so when I first started my internship, we had the fires happening in September of last year. So
mm.
the very first thing that I did in my internship was I was going to hotels where people who were affected by the fires were staying at
Oh,
and
wow.
just interacting with people. I did that before I even had a first one-on-one client. And that was a really big event and really powerful to hear people's stories, to hear what they've lost, but to also see people um, grieving together in a community and healing together in a community.
Mm, yeah, just pulling together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I remember it's been maybe 20 plus years ago when there was some flooding, that I went to do some ministry at a school or a church. It was a school. It was a
Okay.
like where folks were out of their homes, and uh,
Mm.
just you, you know people pulling together. It's really powerful, even in crisis. The yeah the it's neat to neat. That's such a safe word. It's yeah, it's so supportive uh, to have people close to go through stuff
Mhm.
with roommates, friends or family. Um, and so many people are struggling when they don't have someone at home with them, or where they're feeling
Mhm.
lonely and isolated. So,
Yeah, it really exposes the need for others, the need for intimacy, the need for relationship. And I think we kind of lose that value in a really individualistic culture. So I think things like COVID, where we are separated from each other, it really exposes the fact that we were created to be in relationship with one another and that we need one another. We weren't meant to do life alone.
mm, yeah. The A little segue to life alone. You're a wedding photographer still.
Yes. Yeah.
So can we talk about like engagement and engagement photos, engagement wedding plans? Uh, I'm not. You're working with couples with photography. Are you doing couples counseling too?
I haven't done couples counseling before. I
Okay.
really want to.
Hmm.
It feels a bit scary for me right now just because I haven't done it before. And also, I'm not married. So even though I know I could be helpful in that role, there's a part of me that feels like, oh, why would people trust me to do this? I don't know what it's like to be married. Um, but yes, so in my photography work, I am working with couples. In counseling so far, I'm working with individuals.
Okay. Well, so what are you noticing with couples? Um, or let me ask a better question to tap into your expertise. So if there's a couple out there who's dating or engaged, um, do you have any suggestions or recommendations about a successful uh, wedding during pandemic?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh, I feel so bad for my clients who have had to, so many of my clients have had to replan their weddings 5 different times because
Mm,
everything is up in the air and we don't know what things are going to look like 1 month to the next.
yeah.
Um, so firstly, I would say to them, this is a hard thing, and you're having to grieve the loss of every plan that you've put in place that falls through. There's a lot of emotional work that goes into that.
Mm,
Um, I really love small, intimate weddings. So I always tell people, like, embrace it. It can be really beautiful. And also, when the pandemic is over, you could have a really big celebration and then you get the best of both worlds.
mm,
Um, so I'm a really big fan of elopements. I think tend to be low stress. You can go somewhere really beautiful. The photos end up being gorgeous. Um, yeah, I think weddings can be really chaotic and really fast paced. There's a lot that goes into a wedding day.
mm,
So oftentimes simplifying whatever you can in a wedding is my recommendation.
mm. Nice, nice. Yeah. The as we wind things down for our episode, is there anything that you'd like to share with listeners, or anything any info on how to connect with you?
Yeah. Firstly, I think you're putting my Instagram bio in the episode, so people can feel free to reach out to me via Instagram if that works. I guess my encouragement to everyone, especially in the time of COVID, is just to remember that relationships and connection are really important. And it's a really hard time right now not having those things. And so I think a lot of my conversations with clients, with friends, is reminding people of that, reminding them that our social support systems are so important to our mental health, to our well being, to our spiritual lives.
Mm,
Um, so taking time to cultivate those things to really connect with others is so important, to just remember that you're not alone in life.
mm. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Sierra, for coming on It's been good to hear your story and learn more about you.
Thank you for having me. I had a lovely time. This was great.